exquisitely depraved darlings. Did you think the scandal had reached its peak when the mine collapsed and Sir Roland's precious face was kissed by his wife's blade? Oh, how deliciously naive of you. That was merely the overture. The symphony of ruin has only just begun. Last we met, the air was thick with ash, greed, and the perfume of vengeance. Alianor, our gilded captive, became executioner of her own chains. One flick of her trembling hand, and the mighty De Mowbray wore a crimson mask of his own making. The earth shuddered, the miners screamed, and somewhere deep below, justice opened its hungry mouth. But, my loves, collapse is not the end. It is foreplay. What follows is the reckoning. The dust has not yet settled. The crowd has not yet chosen. And the blood, oh, the blood still runs warm. So gather close, you wicked little witnesses. Tonight, truth stands naked, trembling and radiant in the filth of Hawksmere's ruin, and not even God dares look away.
Chapter 13, Reckoning in Dust and Blood. The world fractured. Time didn't just slow. It shattered into jagged, deafening shards. Roland's roar of pain and outrage was swallowed by the mind's deeper, convulsive groan, a sound like the earth's bones breaking. Dust, thick as a burial shroud, billowed from the entrance, choking the air, stinging eyes, and coating tongues with the taste of crushed rock and dread. The gash on Roland's face, a raw crimson slash from temple to jawline, wept freely, painting half his furious visage in grotesque, dripping scarlet. He stumbled back, clutching his cheek, his eyes wide with a primal blend of agony, disbelief, and incandescent fury, focused solely on Alianor. She stood frozen, a statue carved from shock and sudden, terrifying empowerment. The small, sharp eating knife trembled in her hand, Roland's blood, a dark, shocking smear on its simple blade and her own fingers. The metallic tang filled her nostrils, mingling nauseatingly with the dust. Her green samite gown, the symbol of her gilded cage, was now spattered with the tyrant's blood. She hadn't thought, only reacted, a cornered animal finally lashing out. The numbness was incinerated, replaced by a volatile cocktail of terror, exhilaration, and the stark realization, I have drawn his blood. Chaos unbound. The scene erupted into pandemonium. Roland's bellowed command to seize them was lost in the cacophony. The mine. Miners who had been hesitating near the entrance now scrambled back in terror as another deep crunch echoed from within, followed by a rain of smaller stones and a fresh suffocating wave of dust. Muffled screams, distant and horrifying, pierced the groaning rock. Men trapped, buried, dying in the darkness Roland had condemned them to. Gareth, Tom, Jory. Names were screamed into the billowing gray. Wives and children from the nearby hovels began to pour onto the scene, drawn by the unnatural thunder, their cries adding a new layer of piercing horror to the din. The guards. Torn between orders, fear, and the unfolding revelations, Roland's men hesitated. Their eyes darted from their bleeding, enraged lord to the priest holding the damning ring aloft, to the ragged, wounded figure of Eamon Thorne, who should have been dead, to the bloodied Lady De Mowbray standing defiant with a knife. The ring, Eamon's reappearance, the cave-in, Alianor's act. It was too much, too fast. Their swords wavered, discipline frayed under the weight of witnessed tyranny and impending disaster. The crowd, villagers, miners' families, onlookers, their shock crystallized into a volatile mass of outrage and terror. Father Clement's accusation, amplified by the mine's death throes, and Alianor's bloody defiance, ignited a spark. "Thief!" someone yelled, pointing at Roland. "Murderer!" cried another, gesturing wildly towards the mine entrance. "He killed them for lead." The crowd surged forward, not with organized intent, but with a raw, collective fury, born of years of fear and this final, catastrophic injustice. They pressed against the uncertain ring of guards. Osric, Roland's steward stood paralyzed, parchment forgotten at his feet, his face a mask of abject terror. His world of ledgers and quotas was collapsing into blood, dust, and rebellion. He shrank back, trying to become invisible against the timber frame of the assay office. Eamon's charge. Eamon saw Roland's lunge, saw Alianor's desperate slash, saw the blood. A raw sound tore from his throat, part rage, part protective fury. Ignoring the screaming protest from his wounded leg and the deeper agony in his ribs, where Roland's men had worked him over days before, he surged forward, the woodsman's axe no longer a staff, but a weapon held ready. His path took him past the stunned guards, his eyes fixed on Roland, who was momentarily distracted by the pain and the surrounding chaos. "Touch her again," Eamon snarled, his voice ragged, but carrying a lethal edge honed in battlefields and survival. "And I'll bury this axe in your skull, De Mowbray, before you hit the ground." He positioned himself slightly in front of Alianor, a battered, bleeding shield. His gaze flickered to her for a heartbeat, a look filled with anguish for her ordeal, fierce pride in her defiance, and a desperate need to protect her now. "Are you hurt?" he rasped, his voice thick. Alianor shook her head mutely, her eyes wide, still fixed on Roland, the knife held tight, seeing Eamon, truly seeing him alive, ragged and wounded, but alive, after the weeks of despair and the confirmation of blood on the cobbles, sent a fresh wave of emotion crashing through her. Relief so profound, it was painful, tangled with renewed fear for him now. The carved wolf and sparrow seemed to burn against her skin. Roland's rage and retreat. Roland ripped a strip of cloth from his tunic sleeve, pressing it savagely against the bleeding gash. The pain was white hot, a physical manifestation of his humiliation. He saw Eamon standing protectively before Alianor, saw the priest holding his stolen ring like a trophy, saw the crowd's fury turning against him, heard the mind's groans mocking his avarice. His perfect control, his absolute dominion, was crumbling into dust and blood before his eyes. The realization fueled a berserk rage. "Traitors! Vermin!" He spat, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "You think this changes anything?" He gestured wildly towards his guards, his voice cracking with fury and pain. "Kill them! Kill the outlaw! Seize the priest! That woman is mine!" To punish. But his command lacked its former absolute power. The guards, facing the enraged crowd and the palpable shift in the air, only tightened their circle defensively around him, wary of the mob and the wounded, dangerous-looking Eamon. They were protecting their lord, but not necessarily attacking. Roland sensed their hesitation. It was the final insult. His eyes, one nearly swollen shut by the gash and blood, blazed with homicidal intent. He saw Alianor, the source of this public downfall, the woman who had dared, defy, and wound him. With a guttural cry, he raised his sword again, intending to bull through Eamon to reach her. But as he took a step, a chunk of rock, dislodged by the mind's tremors, crashed down from the hillside near the entrance, missing him by feet, but spraying him and his guards with sharp fragments. It was a brutal reminder of the immediate physical danger, a flicker of something akin to fear, or perhaps just a survival instinct sharpened by pain and sudden vulnerability, crossed Roland's ravaged face. He couldn't fight Eamon, the crowd, and the collapsing mountain. He needed leverage. He needed to regroup. His gaze swept the scene, landing not on Alianor, but on the edge of the crowd, where the miners' families huddled, screaming for their trapped men. "The mine," Roland bellowed, changing tack, his voice strained but still commanding. "Your husbands, your sons, are dying in there because of his lies." He pointed a shaking, blood-smeared finger at Eamon and Clement. "And her defiance distracted us from the danger," he pointed at Alianor. "While they spout poison, good men suffocate. Guards, form a chain. Get buckets. We must try to clear the entrance, now." It was a masterstroke of manipulation, twisting the catastrophe into a tool to regain control and redirect the crowd's desperate energy. "Every moment you listen to these snakes is a moment your kin die." The effect was immediate and devastating. The crowd's fury towards Roland momentarily stalled, overwhelmed by the raw, immediate terror for their loved ones trapped underground. Wails of anguish redoubled. Men, who moments before had been shouting accusations, now looked frantically towards the choked mine entrance, then back to Roland, who was suddenly positioning himself as the only one capable of action. "He's right," a woman shrieked, clutching a child. "My Davy's in there. Do something! Clear the rocks?" Roland seized the moment. "You!" he barked at his guards, pointing at Eamon and Clement. "Detain those two. They are under arrest for inciting riot and impeding rescue. If they resist, cut them down." He then pointed at a cluster of miners. "You! You! Get timbers! Shovels! Form a line! Move!" His voice, though strained, carried the weight of accustomed command. The guards, galvanized by a clear order and the shift in the crowd's focus, moved more decisively towards Eamon and Clement, swords raised. The crowd, torn between fury and desperate hope, began to surge towards the mine entrance, grabbing tools, driven by panic for their kin. Alianor's choice and Clement's stand. Eamon tensed, raising his axe, ready to sell his life dearly to protect Alianor and buy time. "Run, Alianor!" he yelled over the renewed din. "Get to the woods!" Father Clement, seeing the guards advance, his hand still clutching the damning ring, acted on pure, desperate instinct. He didn't run. Instead, he raised the ring higher still and turned towards the crowd, surging towards the mine. "People of Hawksmere!" "This man," he shouted, pointing at Roland, his voice cracking with emotion, "cares nothing for your kin. He sent them into a death trap for greed. He framed an innocent man with this." He shook the ring. "He murdered Sir Godfrey. He tortures his wife. He will let your men die while he saves his own skin. This ring is proof. The earth collapsing is God's judgment on his lies." His words were a desperate attempt to counter Roland's manipulation, to keep the truth alive amidst the panic. Some in the crowd hesitated, looking from the ring to Roland's bloody face to the groaning mine. Others, driven by the screams of their trapped family, ignored him, pushing towards the rubble. The guards reached Clement, roughly grabbing his arms. One struck him across the face with a gauntleted fist. The priest crumpled, the ring flying from his grasp, lost in the churned mud and dust at his feet. "Blasphemer!" the guard snarled. Alianor saw Clement fall, saw the ring disappear into the muck. She saw Eamon, wounded but fierce, preparing to fight multiple guards with only an axe. She saw Roland, bleeding but triumphant, in his ruthless redirection of the crisis, shouting orders near the mine entrance, his eyes still flickering towards her with venomous promise. The sight of Clement struck down, the loss of the tangible proof, the imminent danger to Eamon, crystallized her resolve. Fleeing meant survival, but survival under Roland's renewed wrath, knowing Eamon and Clement would be slaughtered. It meant abandoning the men in the mine to die under Roland's hollow rescue. It meant the truth buried again. No. The word formed not on her lips, but in her core. The carved wolf seemed to snarl against her skin. The earth remembers. Truth has claws. Her claws were small, but they were sharp and they were bloody. She wouldn't run. She would fight, not just for herself, but for them all. Instead of turning towards the woods, Alianor did the unthinkable. She ran towards the chaos, not towards Eamon, not directly towards Roland, but towards the edge of the frantic crowd gathering near the mine entrance. She pushed past frightened women, past men numbly grabbing shovels, her green gown now smeared with Roland's blood and gray dust. She reached the spot where Father Clement had fallen. Guards were hauling the dazed priest to his feet. Ignoring them, Alianor dropped to her knees in the mud, her hands frantically scrabbling in the churned earth where the ring had vanished. "The ring!" she cried out, her voice cutting through the localized din. "Find the De Mowbray ring. It's here. Proof of his crimes. Don't let him bury the truth with these men." Her actions, her desperate digging in the mud, her shout about the ring, drew confused attention from those nearby. Some paused in their panic, looking down at the mud, then back to Roland. Roland saw her digging, heard her shout. The sight of her, bloodied but defiant, actively seeking the evidence against him amidst his manufactured rescue effort, reignited his fury. "Silence her!" he roared at a guard nearby. "Drag that madwoman away." The guard nearest Alianor hesitated, looking from his lord's bleeding face to the disheveled noblewoman on her knees in the mud. Alianor looked up, meeting the guard's eyes. She didn't plead. Her gaze held the same terrifying clarity she'd shown when she slashed Roland. "The ring is here," she stated, her voice low but intense. "The ring he stole. The ring that proves he framed Eamon Thorne. The ring that proves he's a liar and a murderer. Do you want truth or more of his lies leading you to your graves?" The guard flinched. He glanced towards the groaning mine entrance, then back to Alianor, then to Roland, who was screaming incoherently now, his composure utterly shattered by pain, rage, and Alianor's relentless defiance. The guard took a step back, lowering his pike slightly. He didn't seize her. Eamon's intervention, and the spark, ignites. Eamon, seeing Alianor's perilous move, used the momentary distraction caused by her actions and the guard's hesitation. He couldn't reach her directly through the press, but he saw an opportunity. With a strength born of desperation, he slammed the butt of his axe handle into the knee of the guard holding Clement. The man yelped, buckling. Eamon then shoved the staggering priest towards a gap in the crowd near the tree line. "Run, father! To the hollow! Now!" Clement, half-stunned, stumbled but obeyed, vanishing into the scrub with surprising speed. Eamon turned, axe raised, facing the remaining guards. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to draw their focus, to create chaos, to buy Alianor time. "Looking for me, De Mowbray's dogs?" he taunted, his voice rough but loud. "Come on! Or are you afraid of a crippled charcoal burner?" He took a limping step away from Alianor's position, drawing 2 guards after him. Alianor, heedless of the scuffle nearby, her fingers numb with cold and frantic effort, finally felt it. Her nails scraped against cold, hard metal, buried in the icy mud. She dug deeper, pulling it free. The heavy gold De Mowbray signet ring, crusted with dirt, and now fresh mud, lay in her bloody palm. She held it up, not just for the nearby crowd, but high, towards the sky, towards Roland. "Here." Her voice, amplified by adrenaline and fury, rang out like a clarion call, cutting through the rescue efforts, the groans of the mine, the shouts of the guards. "Here is the proof. The ring Roland De Mowbray used to frame Eamon Thorne. The ring he thought buried forever. The earth remembers." The effect was electric. The frantic activity near the mine entrance faltered. Heads snapped around. Miners holding shovels froze. Women wailing for their kin stared. Every eye fixed on the small, mud-spattered, blood-stained figure of Alianor De Mowbray, standing tall in the chaos, holding the glinting symbol of Roland's original sin aloft. The stolen ring, the damning evidence. Roland stopped shouting orders. He stared at the ring in Alianor's hand, his face draining of what little color was left beneath the blood, leaving him ashen and suddenly profoundly vulnerable. His mouth worked soundlessly. The meticulously constructed edifice of lies, power, and control didn't just crack, it imploded. A low murmur rose from the crowd, no longer just panic, but a deep rolling wave of fury. The ring was visible proof, held by the lady they'd seen brutalized, confirming the priest's words, confirming Eamon's existence and innocence, condemning Roland beyond any spin. The cave-in wasn't just an accident. It was the direct consequence of his greed, exposed by this moment. "Liar!" The accusation came from Gareth's wife, her face streaked with tears and dust, pointing a shaking finger at Roland. "Murderer!" roared old Tom the blacksmith, hefting his hammer. "Justice!" screamed another voice, then another, and another. The crowd's desperate energy for rescue transformed, refocused into a single, thunderous demand for retribution. They turned, not towards the mine, but towards Roland De Mowbray, a human tide of rage and grief. Roland's guards, seeing the ring, seeing the utter collapse of their lord's authority, seeing the murderous intent in the eyes of the crowd, made a decision. Survival. They lowered their weapons, backing away from Roland, melting towards the edges of the compound, some dropping their pikes altogether. They were no longer his shield. They were spectators to his downfall. Roland stood alone, bleeding, exposed, ringed by the furious faces of the people he had oppressed, the evidence of his crimes glittering in the hand of the wife he had tormented. The mind gave another shuddering groan, a final contemptuous punctuation. He looked at Alianor, her eyes blazing with a fire he had tried so hard to extinguish. He looked at Eamon, limping but standing free, axe still ready. He saw no escape, only the crushing weight of his own ruin. His hand, still clutching the blood-soaked rag to his face, dropped to his side. The rage seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a chilling, absolute emptiness. His shoulders slumped. The tyrant was broken, not by a sword, but by truth, clawed from the earth, and held high by the hand he had deemed powerless. The reckoning had arrived, and it wore the face of his victims. The scandalous hours had reached their zenith in a whirlwind of dust, blood, and the undeniable, terrible light of revelation. The only sound left was the ragged breathing of the crowd and the dying echo of the mountain's collapse.
Ah, so the earth does remember. How poetic that a tyrant's downfall should come not by blade or betrayal, but by the mud itself, clawed by the bloodied hand of his wife. The ring returns, the lies unravel, and the mob, that divine filthy choir, sings the hymn of judgment. I warned you, didn't I? Power built on cruelty always ends the same way, beneath the boots of the very souls it devoured. Now Sir Roland De Mowbray stands stripped of name, of power, of myth, and the dust that rises from his ruin smells sweet as penance. And Alianor? Oh, my radiant sinner. She is no longer the frightened bird in a gilded cage. She is the wolf's song, the spark that burned through silk and sin alike. She stands not as wife or victim, but as a reckoning draped in emerald and blood. But beware, my scandalous hearts. Dust may settle, but it never forgets. The scandalous hours are far from over, and somewhere beyond the smoke something far darker is stirring. Until the next hour, my loves, keep your knives sharp and your secrets sharper.